We need to counteract emerging technologies and threats, particularly from authoritarian regimes and non-state actors. And we've got to do all this in a collaborative way across governments, agencies and the private sector.
I consider the cyber threat environment to be very concerning. Right? It's unstable, unpredictable, and conditions are worsening. The number of threat vectors and targets is going to continue to increase exponentially as we roll out 5G networks and start looking ahead to 6G. So there's growing potential for catastrophic damage to a country's critical infrastructure, and that could have a direct impact just on the plain ability of a society to function. So I see the growth in the capability and capacity of cyber tools really having outstripped our ability to deal with cyber threats, even though we've made considerable investments in trying to prevent and mitigate attacks. So we're facing very uncertain and volatile times. And to your point earlier, the real clarion call is to have better multilateral engagement on these issues, because I truly think it's going to take a grouping of like-minded countries to really be able to deal with this effectively going forward.
What people fail to understand is with the great adoption of those items that make life easier, they operate on the basis of absorption of information and data, and many people don't know what they're absorbing or where that data is going or what it's being used for. And so that's where codes of conduct, for example, or standards which apply to those IoT devices on a global basis are super important, because some of those technologies are developed in countries which don't necessarily have the same values as we do with respect to privacy. So it historically happens during periods of global tension is people, particularly states, seek to obtain more information about other states, i.e. they spy on other states, in order to reduce the uncertainty about what those states are going to do next. So as well as an increase in cyber criminals trying to prosecute all of those networks for financial gain, we have also seen a large increase in state-based activity prosecuting those connections for the purposes, firstly, of espionage to fill those information gaps, and secondly, as Martin points out, for the purpose of potentially pre-positioning to disrupt those services at a point which most suits them, potentially in a conflict scenario.
And if you look at the internet as a whole, the overall benefit of the internet still far outweighs any of these negative influences that we've talked about. And the pandemic was a good example of that, in that without the internet in Australia, the impact of having everyone locked in their houses for weeks and months on end would have been far worse. But many workers were able to continue almost uninterrupted working from home. People were able to have their children in contact with their teachers by working from home. People had health services delivered at home. So there's a lot of benefits there.
I think the point to take out of Russia-Ukraine is that Ukraine had taken steps over the period of a decade since 2013 to really enhance its own sovereign resilience. And it's done that really effectively with the private sector and quite openly. In fact, it was heartening to watch the private sector step in and help Ukraine. And I think the point out of that is making that investment in cyber resilience is worthwhile, and it makes an enormous difference when you look at the way that Ukraine's been able to withstand those cyber attacks.
Australia's not even the biggest user of .au domain names. The US is. And if you think about it, it comes down to where the users are and where the populations are. So that's people in the US interacting with businesses in Australia. It's people in Germany, it's people in China. The top 5 countries that access the internet in Australia, Australia's 2 of the top 5, number 2. But we have China, Germany, US, Northern Europe, where the users are that are accessing the internet. So that means that when you start looking at a security strategy, you've got to realise that we're completely connected with everybody else.
Putting data into, for example, a social media platform, there is no question, there should be full transparency on what happens to that data, where it's stored, and who and what entities have access to it and what it's used for.